Number 10. Home invasion gone wrong. Samantha Allison Weiner, an 18-year-old woman from Ponte Verde Beach in Florida, was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection to a burglary gone wrong. It happened on September 21, 2020. Officers were called just after 1 o'clock in the morning to a burglary in progress and shots fired at a home near Beach Boulevard. When police arrived on the scene, they found Ezekiel Trey Archuleta dead in the front yard of the property. Somebody had shot the young man to death. But here's where things get really twisted and confusing. The man who was killed was not the victim of the home robbery, but rather the robber himself. It was the guy living in the house that shot him dead. Samantha was the orchestrator behind everything. Her ex-boyfriend was the one living in the house, and she wanted revenge on him. Samantha had asked multiple people to rob Roman Gerald Stewart Jr. in retaliation for him dumping her. After a lot of asking around, Ezekiel was the one who finally agreed to do the deed. But what he didn't realize was that when he moved in to rob Roman's house, Roman was locked and loaded. Roman killed Ezekiel before he could even get inside. And even though Roman got away with it on Florida's Stand Your Ground law, Samantha did not. She may not have physically been at the scene that night, but the fact that she organized the whole thing makes her just as culpable in the eyes of the law. Number 9. Stealing from the autistic. This one is really cringeworthy. A woman from New Orleans has been given 20 years in prison for pretending to be a lawyer in order to loot the trust fund of an autistic man. Her name is Christina Galjor, and she pleaded guilty in 2021 to the theft of over $25,000. She also pleaded guilty to 3 counts of practicing law with no license. And as if robbing an autistic person wasn't terrible enough, she had 5 other victims as well, with whom she had collected at least $14,500 from. And she did all of this while pretending to be a lawyer. She used the money she stole from these people to fund exotic vacations and luxury goods for herself. In 2015, the autistic man's parents tragically died. They left him a multi-million-dollar trust fund and a home in New Orleans on Nashville Avenue. It was a terrible loss for the man, and he surely would have traded all that money just to see his parents again. But Christina didn't care about his money or his feelings. In 2016, she introduced herself as a lawyer to the victim. She gained his trust, then convinced him to hand over power of attorney over all his assets. Then, slowly but surely, she started draining him like a vampire. She purchased a new Jaguar, hosted fancy parties, went on shopping sprees, all while the unwitting victim was still grieving his parents. In 2017, she convinced the victim to hand over his house. She told him the only way he could avoid losing it was if he gave it over to her. This would be the big push that eventually had the victim go to the police, who arrested Christina in December 2019. She had 3 good years of robbing this poor man, and now she'll spend the next 20 locked behind bars. Number 8. Kidnapping the wife. 2 people were left dead after a millionaire hired some men to kidnap his wife. It was something straight out of an episode of Fargo. This happened in the town of Lafayette, southern Louisiana. The year was 2017, and in early August, Sylvester Bracey and Arsenio Haynes prepared to do some kidnapping. The 2 men dressed themselves up as workers from an appliance store, armed themselves with semi-automatic handguns, and forced their way into Shonda Handley's home. They put a bag over her head and threw her in the back of a van. But things had gone wrong right from the beginning. A neighbor and her daughter happened to be visiting Shonda when the kidnappers showed up. They handcuffed these people and left them in the house. Already, they were off to a rough start. Then, an off-duty deputy saw the van driving on the shoulder of the road to skirt around traffic. The officer alerted his colleagues, and the kidnapping was foiled. There was a high-speed pursuit. The police chased the van until it eventually hit a dead end. The kidnappers then abandoned the vehicle and left Shonda trapped in the back. When they tried to elude the police by swimming through a canal, they drowned. In the end, it all came back to Lawrence Handley. He had cooked up the whole scheme so that he could swoop in at the end and save his wife from the 2 bad guys, thereby winning her affection back. The 2 were married, but not exactly together, and this was his secret plan to get her back in his arms. Sadly for the 2 men he hired, they both wound up dead in a canal. His wife now hates him more than ever. Plus, Lawrence is looking at 15 years in prison for hiring kidnappers. Number 7. Lawnmower DUI. In summer 2020, a man from Greenwood, Delaware was arrested on his 5th DUI. But there was something a little unusual about his arrest. You see, police responded to calls at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the subject acting disorderly in the grassy area on the side of the farm road. As it turned out, Ralph Cahall was absolutely wasted. Ralph had drunk himself into a stupor, climbed onto his lawnmower, and went for a drive. Since he already had 4 DUIs and didn't feel like getting another one, he thought he could get away with it by driving a lawnmower instead of a car. But that's not really how it works. Even if it is a lawnmower, it's still considered a motor vehicle. It's not like Ralph couldn't have had a few beers and drove his lawnmower on his own property, but the fact that he was going through yards, acting belligerent, and annoying the neighbors, well, that had him hauled off to jail for his 5th DUI offense. He was also charged with resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and criminal trespassing because he drove through people's lawns. Number 6. Failed truck heist. In November of 2021, an armored truck driving along a freeway in California spilled some of their cash. It happened on a Friday, just before 9 o'clock in the morning. The California Highway Patrol began getting 911 calls that there was actual money scattered across a part of the Interstate 5, backing up traffic. The truck had lost a significant amount of cash, and it was all over the road. When people saw what was happening, they got out of their vehicles like a bunch of savage animals and scrounged to get as much of the cash into the pockets as they could. After all, who could just leave all that money lying on the road? But here's the thing about it. All the people who picked up the cash are now thieves. Just because it was on the road didn't mean it was fair game. It came out of an armored truck. The money still belonged to wherever the armored truck was taking it. When the cops arrived, most of the motorists did return the money they'd picked up from the ground, but several people were seen speeding away from the scene with the pockets stuffed full of $1 bills. 2 people were actually arrested for theft on the spot. These 2 individuals had accidentally locked themselves out of their car in their mad dash to pick up money, then got caught since they couldn't drive away. What would you do if you saw an armored truck lose its cash on the highway? Would you steal as much of it as you could and drive away? Or pretend there weren't thousands of dollars blowing across the street? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe before the end of the video. Number 5. Eaten alive. A Florida burglary suspect fleeing from the police in November of 2015 was foiled by something he would have never expected. The burglar, a man of just 22 named Matthew Riggins, was suspected of burglarizing homes in Florida. He had gone on a home invasion rampage, only to find himself in hot pursuit by law enforcement officers. To try and throw the cops off his trail, Matthew waded into a lake. He was hoping that if he hung out in the lake long enough, the police would leave the area and he could get away with his loot. Now, if you live in Florida, a lake is probably the last place you want to be hiding. The burglar was attacked and partially eaten by a massive alligator as he was hiding from the cops. When his body was later discovered and an autopsy was done, it was determined that he drowned during the alligator's assault. A necropsy done on the alligator showed parts of Matthew's body in its stomach. Number 4. Accidentally murdering the murderer in the middle of a murder. It was January 2022 when something both strange and tragic happened in West London. A man drove over a man and a woman, but he did it with good intentions. The 26-year-old driver was trying to stop the man from stabbing the woman to death. You see, the attack was already underway. A man had a knife. He was repeatedly stabbing the woman with it in front of horrified onlookers in Chippenham Road, and there was nothing anybody could do to stop it. It was horrific. There was blood everywhere, and the bystanders were too afraid to take the knife from the deranged lunatic. But not the guy in his car. When he saw what was happening, he steered his vehicle directly into them. His plan was to run over the man with the knife, thereby saving the woman, but he accidentally ran them both over. Her coat got stuck under one of the wheels, and she went underneath the car. Yes, he ended up killing the murderer, who was in the middle of committing a murder, but he also ran over the woman he was trying to protect. It came out later that the man with the knife was Leon McCasker, the ex-boyfriend of Yasmin Chikafi. By the time the car ran them both over, Yasmin had already been stabbed to death by Leon. Both died on scene, in what was a horrible incident of domestic violence at its worst. As for the man behind the wheel who was just trying to help, he was branded a hero by the family of the victim and never charged with murder. Number 3. Burglary fail. A robbery went very bad in Washington back in December of 2021. James Smith was home with his sister when a pair of robbers kicked in his back door just after 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a Thursday, and the rest of the neighborhood was quiet. Jeremy doesn't know why they picked his house, located about 45 miles from Seattle in Spanaway, and he didn't care. When he saw that one of the men was armed, he pulled out a gun and shot them both. One of the burglars was left unresponsive on the floor, while the other escaped the property with a bullet wound. The robber who escaped still hasn't been found and is considered at large. So far as the cops know, he is currently walking around with a bullet lodged in his body somewhere. The first robber, who was the one laying unresponsive on the floor, ended up dying there in the house he was trying to rob. As for Jaram, he was never charged with murder or manslaughter because he was only defending himself. He didn't go looking to shoot anybody, and he's terribly shaken up about having to kill a man. But when 2 strange men kicked open his door in the middle of the night, it was all he could do to protect his family. Number 2. The Craigslist Hitman. A man from Colorado has been given 48 years in prison because of one dead woman, one very poor choice, and a Craigslist ad for a hitman. His name is Joseph Lopez, just 23 years old, when he pled guilty to second-degree murder. The victim was Natalie Bollinger, killed on December 29, 2017. Lopez put a single bullet straight through her head, execution style, as she knelt in front of him. According to a statement from the Adams County District Attorney's Office, he had done it in response to an ad on the single section for the hit. But here's where things get totally wacky. The ad for the hit was put there by Natalie. She had put out an assassin's contract on herself. It came out during the trial that Joseph and Natalie exchanged dozens of text messages before he drove to her apartment, picked her up, and killed her. He had even answered the ad pretending to be an experienced hired killer. After texting for just 2 hours, the pair met in real life. Obviously, this never should have happened. Even if Natalie had put out a hit on herself, Joseph was a real psycho for going along with it. All he even got out of the deal was to take someone's life, a free gun, and the measly contents of Natalie's purse. When an autopsy was done, it became clear that she had an almost lethal level of heroin in her system, so she was drugged and not in her right state of mind. Yet, instead of alerting the police and getting Natalie the help she deserved, Joseph allowed himself to become the Grim Reaper. Number 1. LA Hit and Run. On February 20th, 2021, a homeless man in Los Angeles decided he needed to steal a truck. It was a big success, and a crime he might have gotten away with. That is, if not for the fact that as he sped away, he ran over a woman with his truck. He didn't just clip this innocent bystander with a stolen truck. He drove right over her and severely injured her. It happened late at night, with the homeless man stealing a 2001 Toyota Tundra. This is a big truck, not something you want plowing into as you're walking across the street. He struck a female pedestrian who never even saw it coming. She was rushed to the hospital and later released, but she'll be traumatized and scarred for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, the thief knew he was in big trouble. He abandoned the truck before he could ever sell it or get anything out of it, and ran away. When police checked the truck for DNA evidence, they were able to identify the man as Tajon Wright Freeman, a person with a history of felonies. He was already a wanted man, even before he ran over a pedestrian and then took off into the shadows. What's the most absurd petty criminal fail you've ever heard of? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you again soon for another shocking video. Bye!